Hello, welcome to BBC World News. Two Reuters journalists jailed by Myanmar for breaking the Official Secrets Act have been unexpectedly freed from prison. Their release was part of a presidential amnesty that also included thousands of other prisoners. As they walked out of jail, one of them, Wah Lone, spoke to our correspondent Nick Beak.
Because inside in the prison and also around the world, people who are wishing to release us. So I would like to say thank you very much for everything. I'm really happy and excited to see my family and my colleagues. And I can't wait to go my newsroom now.
Wah Lone, whose name we've been hearing so much over recent months. Let's get more from our Southeast Asia correspondent, Jonathan Head in Bangkok. Jonathan, fantastic news. How out of the blue was this?
Well, the pressure was intense. On the other hand, up to now, most of that pressure had been focused on Aung San Suu Kyi, who in the end should be decisive in this. The judicial process was exhausted when the case went to the Supreme Court. Their appeal was rejected. But at any point, Aung San Suu Kyi, who is de facto leader, could have had the president offer a pardon to these two men. We know from the encounters with her that diplomats have had that she's been very stubborn, indeed even resentful of the international pressure she's been put under, and has insisted all along, frankly, against pretty heavy evidence, that they were justly convicted, that they'd broken the law. This must have been her decision. We know there have been behind-the-scenes talks. There have actually been two amnesties already for what's known as the traditional amnesty period, the New Year, the Burmese New Year, from April. Large amnesties, with a great deal of disappointment that the two men weren't included. So it does seem as though there was a lot of hesitation, and we're not quite sure what finally persuaded the Burmese authorities to do this, but this has been long awaited, long campaigned for. Just on a human level, Wah Lone there, he's going to be able to be with his baby daughter for the first time since she was born. She was born while he was in prison. Kyaw Soe-u will be seeing his young daughter as well. Very, very important for these two men now to be able to spend time with their families after more than 500 days in prison on what almost everyone recognises were very unjust charges.
Jonathan, take us back. Remind us what got Wah Lone and Kyaw Soe-u into this situation in the first place, reporting what was happening to Rohingya Muslims.
Well, lots of us were trying to investigate what was going on, this massive military operation against the Rohingyas in August of 2017, responding to some attacks by Rohingya militants at the time. Access was extremely limited, and almost all the information about atrocities, and there was a lot of it, was coming from refugees who fled, and of course in vast numbers, over to Bangladesh. Kyaw Soe-u and Wah Lone were part of a Reuters team trying to get information actually from inside Rakhine State. The Burmese government and military were denying atrocities and saying the refugees weren't telling the truth. These two journalists actually got people inside a village who had witnessed 10 Rohingya men being executed, being killed while they were tied up, well, they weren't armed at all, by the Burmese military. And it forced the Burmese authorities for the first time to acknowledge that their troops had illegally killed people, and 10 soldiers were prosecuted for that. But immediately after that, these two journalists were then invited to a meeting with police officers who said they had documents for them. The moment those documents were handed to them, apparently without them even being able to see them, they were then arrested and charged with breaking the Official Secrets Act.
Jonathan, their plight was reported on so much around the world. How much coverage did they get in Myanmar?
Quite a bit, and there was a lot of sympathy for them within the Myanmar media. A lot of other journalists who are trying to do their jobs there in very difficult conditions, and many of them, others of them, are actually facing prosecution as well, tried to raise attention. And I think there was some sympathy. These were Burmese journalists who, in the eyes of many, were just doing their jobs. But there were many others who accepted the government's line that it's held up pretty much since the Rohingya crisis, that Myanmar is being misreported by foreign media, that it's being put under unfair foreign pressure by foreign governments. And some Burmese will doubtless see what these two men did working for a foreign news agency as somehow betraying their own country. It'll be interesting to see what kind of reception they get now and what they do now with the freedom that they've won.
Jonathan Head in Bangkok reporting on that good news story. Wah Lone and Kyaw Soe-u now freed in Myanmar.